Welcome to my first full-length episode on my podcast, Get Unstuck with Lindsay. I'm your host, Lindsay Lewis, and I really hope to help you get unstuck on purpose because even though there's a lot of help out there, sometimes we don't even really know how to find it, where to look, where to start. It seems like it takes a whole entire day just to get through the tasks of one day. So as many of you know, whether it's an emotional issue you're wanting to resolve or a physical issue you're wanting to resolve, you still have to take the time, you have to do some research, you have to use energy that you probably don't have when you're bogged down, and then you have to find the right help. So I am just here to tell you it's all possible. You're the only person who can do this work for yourself, no matter what it is, but you certainly do not have to do it alone. So as you know, if you listened to my trailer, I got really stuck moving forward with this podcast, and I've learned a few things. One of the things is that we're always going to get stuck, but there's a big difference between getting stuck in life with certain situations, circumstances, events versus living very stuck. And for me, I just don't live a stuck life anymore. But in the work that I do, sitting with women, some men and kids on a regular basis, we all get stuck. We're all humans. And one of the greatest lies that we've ever believed is that we're alone in whatever we're dealing with. And I feel really privileged to hear so many stories and be trusted with the information. And I can tell all of you that you're not alone, that your pain is certainly valid, but other people do experience the pain that you feel. So one of the promises that I've made to myself here on this first episode is just to let this flow, because the buildup to this podcast has been so big and has really caused me to actually get really unhooked from having a plan and having a schedule, because nothing's really gone how it's been planned. And I even didn't have internet. So you'll see on if you listen to my trailer that I ended it by saying my first guest is going to be as much of a surprise to you as it is to me. And the reason for that is because I had a whole lineup of wonderful women who have been a part of my journey to getting unstuck, who have beautiful tools. A lot of us are colleagues and we actually share clients with one another. And it was the excitement and the journeys that we all shared together that was actually causing me to want to add a podcast to my very overbooked schedule, because they have so much wonderful information to share. And one fight for me is, the information's out there. Everybody can find it if they want it. But then when I'm having a discussion with one of these women and we're sharing a client who's finally experiencing breakthrough, I think to myself, like, this is the change that needs to happen. And I only was able to connect one of the girls that I love with this woman because I ended up connected with this practitioner. And so kind of instead of doing like just Instagram, since I know not everyone is on Instagram, or just YouTube, which the truth is I'm just really bad at uploading videos to YouTube, I thought, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to hire a professional no matter how much it costs. I'm going to hand this podcast over to them. And that way there's this extra layer of protection and making sure that all of this information gets into the hands that it needs to get into, because during my day I sit with private clients. That's my number one focus. It's my goal. And leading my groups, that I really truly, no offense to myself, don't want to sit and edit an hour-long interview of my face and somebody else in a conversation I've already had in order to then upload it on multiple platforms. So as I decided to hand this over to somebody else, I ran into a lot of problems. In fact, one is that we moved to a part of town. We left. This is part of my journey getting unstuck. So first, let me say this. This episode is just going to be dedicated to my girls, to my tapping queens, because so many of you have been encouraging me with this, backing me up, helping me edit things. You've seen the fight, you've seen the struggle of just like, why am I even doing this? I don't have the time, I don't have the energy. And as I continued to try to get things moving and recorded, I learned that I love engaging with people. I love conversations. I love the dynamics of a real authentic conversation. But then as I tried to sit down and do my trailer, I got really stuck. And I think the reason for that is because I knew a lot of people would listen to it. or at least I hoped they would. And for some reason, even though it was only supposed to be 2 or 3 minutes, there was a lot of pressure for me to say what I wanted to say, to try to encapsulate the whole entire future of whatever this podcast is going to be, whether it's 3 weeks or 3 years, into this 2 or 3 minute blurb. And I can post 2 and 3 minute videos authentically all the time on Instagram. But for some reason, when it came to this, I just was so stuck. And what I wanted was to just be really clear with what I was trying to say. I wanted to get the full picture of what this will be in just a couple of minutes, and realized I was writing, I'll even show you, like all these sticky notes of what I was going to say, and then trying to like read them in order and say what I wanted to say and make sure nothing got missed. And it was just so frustrating for me because I never read from a script, not my own, not anybody else's. But for some reason, when I'm talking to a screen to myself that doesn't have a live audience, like in my groups, it was just different for me. And it honestly, I even kind of felt like I dissociated a little bit, like continuing to try to repeat the same things. So I just wanted to show up here and just be with you and actually update a lot of you on what's been going on with my health, because you ask all the time. And it is one of my areas where I have been very stuck and have gotten unstuck. And then also just share with you kind of how this podcast came about, some of the things that I find myself repeating on a regular basis, and just really give this to my people. If no one ever listens to this outside of my current girls and my friends and my family, then that's okay with me. But I said I'd have a guest, and I don't have a guest because we didn't have internet for 2 years. For some reason, nobody was able to service us. We are kind of in the country, but not in the country enough to not have internet. And so as I moved forward with doing this podcast, one of the things that was important to me was to exhaust every single option I didn't know about with internet. Good news is Starlink happened to become available. I was able to get it. It worked great. And it's been working lovely for maybe 5 months for my one Zoom group that I really, really need internet for in a week. And as I sat down to do that trailer over and over and over and over, the internet kept glitching. So there was really no way for me to rely on my internet, even for this podcast. So last week when I recorded that, I was in the mindset that I was going to be able to actually move forward with my girls that I wanted to interview, the ones that started this whole thing, the ones that I'm constantly in connection and relationship with. And guess what? None of them are here locally or in person. So that internet connection got so bad during just that 2 and 3 minute trailer. I knew I couldn't rely on it for these interviews. And I thought, you know what? I just don't even know who my first guest is going to be, because it's going to have to be in person, and that's okay. And then, I ended up really stuck again with a situation that I didn't see myself being faced with. I felt just totally frustrated, totally defeated, and I knew that something had to get thrown off my plate, which I'll kind of teach you as I go. One of the things that I teach my girls as a coach is that sometimes when we have this big plate full of overwhelm, it feels like we have to like bump things off the plate in order to lighten the plate and make it feel less overwhelming. While sometimes that is true, a lot of the time our overwhelm can actually be solved or cured or fixed or lightened by actually supporting that plate with something that makes us feel stronger, whether it's honestly resting, right? Taking care of ourselves, maybe getting that workout we haven't gotten for a while. So sometimes that overwhelm is cured by adding something that supports and undergirds the plate. And now that plate actually feels lighter. So in this case for me, I got to the point because of the internet and because of how hard I'd been trying. And then with this health hiccup, I actually reached out to Kevin. I give Kevin a shout out because he's absolutely amazing, my podcast guy. And I said, I just have to hit the pause button on the podcast. So is it like a pausecast? I have to hit the pause button. indefinitely. I didn't say permanently, because I knew that anything that is really good and really worth our time will probably be interrupted by greater forces that don't want it to happen. And so I said, I just have to pause this indefinitely, because being so excited about it, but then feeling like internet continued to get in the way, even though I love lighting and the sunshine, there was no way and no time of the day where I didn't have this big interruption of like a big sunbeam and sunlight, which it is a miracle right now that it is not beaming in on me. I really just think this is because it's time to do this. And I said, I've got to hit the pause button. This is something I have to take off my plate. I have to just think, I have to take care of my private clients, and I will loop back around to you when I'm ready. Well, lo and behold, I have gotten just enough rest between then and today, and realized that there's this old app on our computers called Photo Booth that my kids used to play with in the backseat of my car when we'd go on road trips. And it is turning out to just be exactly what's going to allow me to show up for you. So I am here alone, but I am so excited because I have an interview with somebody for you today. It just worked out so well for me to do this with you first. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in me. And thank you to all of you who've just been really gently nudging me and pushing me. So I have no script, because I found out that I hate those. And hopefully we won't need too long here, because I just completely trust that we're going to have all the time to say all the things and do all the things that we really want to do here. But I do want to share with you a little bit about some of the areas in my life where I have found that I've been stuck, especially in recent years, and some areas where I got unstuck from recently, even just doing this podcast, because I always hope that by me climbing out of some of this, it'll just be an encouragement. And I always say, if it's just for one person, then it's totally worth it. So if you don't really know me, my name is Lindsay. I've been married now I just celebrated my 19-year anniversary, and we actually have only known each other for 20 years because we were just silly teenage kids when we met and we got pregnant and decided, you know what, like, let's just try to do this thing. And so we just celebrated that 19-year anniversary and just went over the last 2 decades together and how we really raised each other, and how beautiful marriage can be if both people want it to be. So that'll be a really special topic here. I have some really special guests when this internet is stable to share about their journeys in marriage. And I'm actually really, really excited to have my very quiet man of few words on here, because he's been one of my greatest teachers and has truly just loved me in times that he did not have to, and is such a powerful, strong, good husband. And I know there's not enough of those anymore, and speaks so much truth into my life, and is one of the reasons I'm able to be here with you. So I'm excited to have him on just to share some of the areas where he and we thought one way and have really been just curious and not rigid. And we ended up moving over to a different way of thinking, and it's made us more gentle. It's made us less angry. It's made us feel more free. And we continue to just kind of land into the truth of what we know to be good. So like I said, there's times in my life that I lived stuck. So, I don't think I'm going to get into that here, but like, being a teenage mom, being the girl who, wasn't going to get pregnant before she was married, and I got pregnant, and that was really heavy and really embarrassing. And then trying to be a young mom, he had only lived with his parents. I'd only ever lived with my parents. And so not only were we learning how to be parents for the first time at 19, 20 years old, we were learning how to be roommates for the first time, and we were learning how to be parents. And so that was really hard. And then simply just times of struggle, some old ways of thinking that nobody like guided us, loved us, mentored us. There was just some hang-ups, some habits that really tried to pull us down and ruin our marriage, and we had to just keep fighting. So there's been a lot of areas of just this like undercurrent of, when am I going to climb out? When am I going to climb out? When am I going to climb out? And that's a heavy feeling. And because I work with women all the time in this, I see women get unstuck all the time. I get unstuck all the time. And like I said, leading up to this, there was a lot of areas where I got really stuck, even down to the point of hitting the pause button last week and saying, I don't even know when I'm going to get to come back to this. And then boom, here I am. So one of the things I wanted to touch on is my current health status. And then how, even, with this podcast leading up to it, it's really funny because I never wanted to do a podcast. It wasn't something I thought it wasn't a goal for me. And I actually don't even really listen to podcasts. And every time I do, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I love that people are talking about this. Everybody should listen to this. Everybody should have this information. And I realize that I'm not much of like an investigator. I'm not one of those to like dig and dig and dig for information. My husband is, but I am someone who really loves to learn. And sometimes I don't get pushed to learn unless I sign myself up for a certain class or really sit in and listen on a podcast or something on a new product. And really, truly, I don't make a lot of time for that. So my kind of interest in the podcast was really sparked by the Business of Happiness. I'm going to share her name with you here. Pop over to her podcast. Her name's Taryn. She's just a beautiful soul. She's a wonderful woman. And she was the first one ever to ask me to be on her podcast. And so that was my first experience. I was like, well, this is nice that somebody cares about what I have to say with tapping. And then what I learned later is that she's a coach and she loves to learn. And she was having people on this podcast to connect people with people. And so my whole thing with tapping actually started because I was so stuck with just decades of anxiety. I even had what we thought was a gluten intolerance that was really probably more like an anxiety thing that had turned from emotional to physical. And so I had all these years of, praying and asking to be healed and even going on Xanax for my anxiety. And it just kept getting so wound up and worse and worse and worse. And then it was like, I couldn't make proper decisions and I made bad choices. And then I did things to try to like ease my mind. And when I found tapping, I thought it was so weird and it worked. And that's what I realized was what's so weird about it is that it actually worked when really, truly, I felt nothing else had up to that point. And for those of you who are listening who consider yourself a faith-based person or a Christian or a Jesus follower, I want to be honest and tell you I was really mad at God because I felt like I had asked him for a long time. I was a girl who believed that God was good and that prayer was important. And I asked him to heal this anxiety, set me free from this. And when I found this weird, if you've never seen tapping, go look it up or follow me somewhere. And I just felt like he could have delivered me from that and saved me from that and healed me from that. And instead, there's this really weird thing that, especially as a Christian, we don't tap on our bodies and repeat words after each other and breathe. We're just not taught that in church or usually in our families. And I thought, this is so weird and this is so woo-woo that, it's just not fair that this weird thing worked better than you did, God. And I actually had a season of really questioning him. And that's something I want to go into another time as well. So if you do reach out to me, let me know if that speaks to you because I have some beautiful resources, a lot of things I want to share for people of faith. And just to let you know too, I also am aware that there's a lot of Christians or people who call themselves Christians who have hurt you and who have hurt the church or hurt people you love. And I want to apologize on behalf of them and tell you that being in church and being a Sunday Christian, maybe even a little bit like a legalist is definitely a part of my story and being really stuck and coming out of that and really learning what it means to love Jesus and live in a way that honors him and love people the way Jesus loves people and live my life the way Jesus did is very different than being a Christian. So if you ever hear me say the word Christian, know that I am saying it to redeem the true meaning of what that is. I am certainly not in the same club or the same box as your Aunt Janet, who told you you're going to burn in hell if you don't get baptized. So what I learned through that experience was actually that God had connected hundreds of dots that led me to this really strange tapping thing. And that was a huge faith builder for me. And I realized, being a Christian, some people don't understand you. They think you're going to hit them with a Bible. And I was really, really used to being somebody that some people had the wrong idea of, or even the right idea of. I'm not going to lie. I hurt people as a Christian and people in the church, and people hurt me. And so coming into this thing that seemed really weird and woo-woo-y, or some people would call it New Age and like Eastern medicine, it was actually a really good thing for me. And I was a good person for it because I knew what it felt like for people to misunderstand me and think I was weird. And what I learned is that it was oftentimes Christians who were the least understanding of this tool. And so a lot of my journey, rest assured, if you're a Christian, was actually really understanding the mechanisms of this, the science of this, why tapping is so effective. And it really is scientifically founded. There's, I believe, more than 275 peer reviews on it. It's so beautiful. It's so powerful. It's so science. And really, truly, I do believe as a Christian, it is the perfect tool and a gift from God for a time such as this for everybody living today, because it's so accessible, it's so free, it's so powerful, and truly it's at the tip of your fingers anytime. So that's some of my health stuff in a sense, and with tapping, because that anxiety just fell off me into a puddle the first time I used it, and it was so weird because nothing else had helped. And at what I noticed is that I had told this story of something that was so sad. And when I told the story, I had big feelings in my body and I was crying, and I was like ugly crying. And this friend had me tap on my body and breathe and say these words. And I was like, oh, this is so weird and so dumb. And nothing's going to work for this. But what was really interesting is it only took about 4 minutes before I was able to actually tell the same story without crying. And it's not to say crying's bad, but the reason I was crying is because that story, as I told it, felt like it was in my body right then. It felt like it was happening in real time as I recalled this event that was about 3 to 5 years prior. And so as I told that story again, and my body calmed, it relaxed, my shoulders relaxed, I took a nice breath, and I told the story. What was interesting that I noticed is that my story actually didn't change. My story first, while I was ugly crying, so you can imagine, was it's so sad, and it's so sad, and there's nothing I can do about it. There was just this desperation in my voice, and this like frantic thing in my voice. And that last time I told this story, I said exactly like this. I said, you know what? It is really sad, but there's nothing I can do about it. And that was the moment for me that I thought, oh my gosh, this thing has been so big. And for some reason, it feels like it's actually 3 and 5 years ago now. Like, how did something just move to farther? I couldn't get it. And it was so shocking to me. And that's one of the cool things about tapping now that I've been doing this for 8 or 9 years, is that there's a lot of cliches, right? Like, just get over it. As Christians, give it to God, just forgive them, just pray about it. Time heals all wounds. Only time will tell. And what's so cool is that those things are all just like really annoying cliches when somebody tells you that, right? And you kind of wrestle with it. But then usually when we tap and we really move through the process of taking something that is feeling so big in our body and really moving it subconsciously into the time and place it belongs, then now we come to the conclusion of, oh, wow, time really did heal this wound. But what we did was we moved that trauma to the place that it belongs, and it feels like it's actually farther away. And so it feels healed. Whereas we all know there's things that are far away that do not feel healed at all. So one of the things I love about tapping is that it really does actually bring us sometimes into the truth of what we know, even if it's not what we're really feeling. And that's something I'm going to talk about a lot here with you is, for example, walking into a crowded room and you feel anxious and your friend says, you don't have to be anxious right now, right? You go, yeah, I know. Okay. But you can know you don't need to be anxious, but you feel, right? You feel it so big in your body. That is what tapping is for. And that is what I'm here for you. Because it doesn't matter if you know how to lose weight or you know how to detox or you know how to parent. If you don't feel the truth of all these things in your body and your nervous system isn't calm and relaxed and stabilized, you have these oversecretions of cortisol shooting through your body, constantly telling you to run or hide instead of really focusing in. So we'll get into more of that later. I thought I was going to be just helping people with this weird tapping tool who were in the church, in my Bible studies, in my mom's groups, and just as like friends and family would start to tell me these stories, right? Because we all know somebody who's been telling that same repetitive story for decades, right? And let's be honest, we are that person at some point, who maybe even now you still tell that story where you just had this thing happened and you just keep telling the story and you keep telling the story and you keep telling the story. And I thought, you know what if I could get certified in this and like really understand it and really know how to use it, and then help all those, annoying Christian ladies like myself at the time, to just stop telling that same story they've told forever and ever, because my story changed. I didn't need to tell it anymore after that. I was no longer hooked to this story. It was no longer my identity, which is a big thing that happens, that our story becomes our identity. We got so stuck in it that we don't even realize we're afraid of writing a new story and having a new identity, because that story is so familiar. And as much as we don't like it, it's comfortable. So I thought I was going to be using this as like a secret weapon to go in and like get some people to just shut up and stop telling their story. But what actually happened is that I had some young girls I was mentoring, and we started folding it into our time together. And then I had more women who had a lot of, they said, I know God loves me, but I don't feel like God loves me. And I was like, well, let's just see if this tapping thing helps with that too. And it did. And it really helped them to feel like God was as close as they knew he was. So there's that feeling and that knowing coming back into alignment with each other. And as I just kept sitting with women and playing with this tool, I realized it kept surprising me, and it kept working no matter how old or young they were, no matter what the issue was. Their bodies always relaxed, and they always ended up walking away with something revealed about them, something revealed about the truth. Whatever this thing was, no matter big, bad, scary, heavy, there was always a truth revealed that even if it made them feel vulnerable, or even if they felt pain with it, they had a new piece to their puzzle, and it gave them a new power and a new confidence that they could take it and move forward with it as a teacher or as a guide, and encouragement for them in their journey, instead of being burdened by it. And before I knew it, my schedule filled up with really, truly private clients, one after the next, one after the next. And it's been about 9 years. I've been raising elementary school kids and teenagers now. I have a 16-and-a-half-year-old daughter and a 19-year-old son who is now out of the house. And we've done that. We moved from little beach house onto property, which is another area my husband and I will talk about, getting unstuck from city life to farm life, becoming more self-sufficient. And I've just taken tapping with me the whole entire time for my own personal work as well as my clients. I had become certified almost immediately. It was a slow, grueling process for me, but I did do it, and I got to walk away from the job that I had kind of grown out of, I didn't love, and have been doing this full time. And so another beautiful thing too is as COVID hit, right? We all lived through COVID season. It wasn't even really COVID and the dynamics around COVID that affected a lot of people with like job losses or kids coming home for homeschool, stuff like that. Our COVID was actually affected very differently, or our COVID season was it affected us differently outside of COVID, because we experienced the death of my father, a big move, and then we had some struggles with teenagers, and it was a really rough few years. But what I realized is that even with those big hits, and even with those big stressors and all of those deep uncertainties that so many of us experienced during that season, I realized that my body was more relaxed. I realized that I was able to think more clearly. I realized that I was able to process, the steps that needed to be taken. And I wasn't as frantic about it or as physically anxious as I would have been years previous had something so big and so long lasting had happened. And that was really, truly my first big upset. It lasted a long time, like it did for you, and realized, you know what, all of the tapping on every situation, every circumstance that I could from that point on back to when I first got my hands on this tool, I realized that what I had been doing for 5 years or so was really not just clearing away old stuff, but actually preparing myself to come to a day where there's real fear, real stress, real anxiety, and my body still doesn't need to run from the lion. It knows now that we stay right here and the blood stays in our brain because we need to think. And I was able to think, I was able to strategize even when I was scared. So my faith in this tool was even more confirmed during that season of 2020, 2022 or so. And since then, my practice has gotten so big. I don't know if I can call it a practice, but so big and so busy that I'm just booked out farther than I like to be. Tapping is a quick, fast, effective tool. I loved when people would reach out to me and I was available that day, and that's not the case anymore. And so what I've done is I've put multiple groups on my schedule of times that girls can show up and just tap for an hour with me live. And I've also added in some intro to tapping classes kind of quarterly. Not perfectly quarterly, but hopefully we'll be able to get about 4 or 5 of those in a year. And that is just one way that I was able to continue getting this into as many hands as possible, connecting with as many women as possible, and still continuing to meet with my private clients. And here's the really beautiful thing that I love. And any therapists who are listening, anyone who has a therapist that they love, I completely honor you. I think that there's lovely therapists out there who are very good at their job, and I think there's a time and a place for it. However, one of the ideas of tapping and why it works so well is because when we're thinking about an upsetting or traumatic event or talking about it, our subconscious doesn't actually know if we're just talking about it and remembering it, or if it's actually happening all over again. So this is one reason why sitting in something like talk therapy and going back and forth, opening up our story, talking about it, opening up our story and talking about it, sometimes our subconscious thinks that we're reliving it over and over and over. And so I always say it's like, if it was this traumatic the first time it happened when you were 4, now it's just snowballing and snowballing. And I would say it's like creating like a bigger snowball or like a callus around this event, which really truly is what PTSD is the more time passes, the bigger the thing feels. With tapping, what we're doing is we're specifically speaking words for our subconscious saying, hey, right now, I might be thinking about the thing. I might even be talking about the thing, but it is not happening. And I am safe right here to just think about it. Boom. For the first time, some people's subconsciouses completely submit. They relax. The blood comes back into your brain. And now you're thinking about this thing with full clarity, full peace of mind. And that's where the filing gets done. So I realized that one of the reasons why I got so full and so booked out was, one, COVID season was really upsetting and traumatic for a lot of people, and they were looking for something that really worked. And a lot of people had been in therapy or tried other modalities, and they felt maybe some progress, maybe a lot of progress, but they still felt some areas they were stuck in and they wanted to try something new. Other people had never tried anything and just wanted something. And some people had felt like they had tried everything and nothing worked, and they were just desperate and willing to try something their friends said work. And so I just got really busy. So I'm thankful for that. But I also just want to fix all of the ladies and anyone that comes to me and just send you away feeling happy and healthy. And so the beautiful thing is sometimes I have somebody for 3 weeks. Sometimes I have somebody for 6 months or 2 years, just depending on the workload and what they want to tackle. This isn't something that anyone has to do for 20 years. We should be neutralizing old events, getting them filed, sitting in the beautiful present moment, being able to focus on a day's task in a day and the emotions that come up in a day and be able to feel really confident about them. Sometimes going into the future, not in a weird way, but like thinking about what could set us back or what are we concerned about, or even what do we want to accomplish, and what are the blocks to reaching that, go through it. And then people are really not just neutral, but feeling excited, energized, powerful, confident, all of those beautiful, beautiful things. And that's what I love to do. And then boom, you don't need me anymore until there's an emergency. So that's what I love to do. And because my passion is really just getting this into as many hands as possible, so you can use it on your own for free. I don't want your business. I don't need your business, but I love you and I would love to connect with you. But I want to get this tool into as many hands as possible because it's so powerful and so freeing. So please share this with your friends. My health. Health is a big area where I've also been really stuck. We will go way more into that, but let's just kind of talk about the more recent stuff so I can get you tied up and out of here and back onto your beautiful day. 2 years ago, we moved onto this property. It was a 3 acres and a 1981 house that needed work. We knew there was some mold in the kitchen, and we decided we were going to deal with that while we lived into a little studio that was on the property that my dad was supposed to live in, but he had passed right before moving in. And so we decided we were going to live in it. While we were living in there, we realized there was probably more mold in that building we did not know about than the actual kitchen. And so we had to move out of there, move into kind of the moldy kitchen house, remodel that studio apartment first. And everything was just really out of sorts. It was during those 2 years where everything was chaotic. And I started hearing a lot of buzz around breast implant illness. At the time I had breast implants, they were about 10 or 11 years old. And I really started understanding the connection between what women maybe thought were autoimmune disease or being diagnosed in the medical field with all these things. And they got their implants out and they felt a lot better. And I had been having a lot of weird health stuff show up. I was tired all the time, really fatigued. My eyes were dry and itchy. And I was also living in a very stressful state, both emotionally and physically. But I felt that my nervous system was at least stable enough to where I wouldn't have been in any sort of physical pain because of my emotions, because our emotions can certainly manifest physically, but that's not where I felt like I was. I felt like this was very physical. And at the time I had a lot of friends, a lot of healers. I worked with an incredible team of 10, 15 natural holistic practitioners and doctors. And I felt like I just had all the support and love that I possibly could have needed. And it seemed right to go ahead and remove the breast implants so that I could eliminate that. It was a big decision, but I did it very calmly and without any anxiety. In fact, I had to remove myself from all of the Facebook groups of all of the, I think there was like over 400 Facebook groups of all these women who were going through breast implant illness or thought that they were. And it was so devastating to me to see how anxious they were and how wound up they were. And I just wanted to hand deliver tapping to all of them, but that would look like promoting myself in the group. And so I wasn't really comfortable with it. And sometimes it was prohibited. So I had to remove myself because I was so calm and so collected and realized like this weird tapping thing just keeps working because yeah, like this is uncomfortable and this is hard. But once I knew it was the right thing to do, it was smooth sailing and I was able to just lean into that. It felt like the right thing to do. And I felt really confident moving forward. So I did. And I also knew that, heavy metals in our bodies, a lot of like dental work can cause heavy metal toxicity in our body. And what I didn't know is that even though I had white caps on my teeth and white fillings, that there was actually metal under them. So we will get into that another time. But that was about $10,000, $12,000 to remove all of that from my mouth properly with the right biological or bioidentical dentist. And so I had that done also. So I knew that just because these things were out of my mouth didn't mean I was pure and clean. I needed to detox. So I've been doing that for the last year. And I had a doctor who was a naturopath kind of doctor for the last 10 years who fixed me up so beautifully and so well, even with breast implants, even with metal in my teeth, that I knew once I got all this stuff out, she was just gonna like stitch me up and send me on my way, and everything was gonna be good, and I was gonna get my energy back. And with all the chaos of 2020 to 2022 kind of being closed up, I was just gonna be a new person. My daughter was gonna have a ride to school. I was gonna be able to sit with more clients. And by then, you know, this new little farm would feel like home. And over the last 10 months, I got worse and worse and worse and worse and more tired. And I ended up sick, like virusy type sick on a regular basis. And it was my birthday or the day after this last birthday that I had received my results for a hormone test and was going over them with Michelle Scarlett, who, when my internet's working, she and I are going to be here because she was going to be my first interview. So check her out. But we went over this hormone test, and up to that point, I had realized the only people, because I left the insurance world as an insurance agent and being on medications and loving what I didn't know, that I kind of believed in big pharma and that it was really safe and medicine was good and doctors were good, which I'm not saying all of them are bad, and moved over to this kind of natural, holistic side of things. There's a lot of muscle testing involved, and I think it's really incredible. I think it can be really great. But I realized that over the last 10 years or so, I really only had muscle testing used for a form of seeing what was going on inside my body, not a lot of like labs or hormone tests, because I had learned that those were very vague and didn't tell you the truth anyway. Well, Michelle was amazing and encouraged me. She said, please, let's just get some numbers on paper and let's look at them. I want to see what's going on inside of you as a friend. And so we looked at it, and I just cried and I cried and I cried, because I had 1 year ago when I explanted, before I explanted, my hormones were junk. It was one of the signs that I needed to make a change. And I thought for sure 10 months later, doing everything this natural doctor had told me to do, I was going to be great. And I was worse than ever. And so when we went over those, she said, Linz, these are even worse than a year ago. And there's definitely something deeper going on. You know, there's a root we've got to get to. And I just remember in that moment, like, being thankful for her, being thankful for somebody who had the knowledge and the wisdom and the education, and also just completely losing trust for a doctor I had trusted for 10 years. Because if I couldn't trust her to find things, and if I did everything she said for 10 years and I felt worse, there was never going to be anyone I could trust with my physical health again. And so I kind of just sat in it. You know, I knew that this was probably just a season, but I needed to just sit in it. I needed to feel frustrated. I needed to feel stuck. I needed to feel a little hopeless. And what I did do was I just was really clear with her, and I used my voice with her. And I also had another gal who had been kind of looking at my health and wanting to support me. So I kind of talked to both of them and listened to both of them and put some pieces together with both of them, and really, really had to spend some time and realized, you know what? I could never trust anybody with my health, and I probably won't get anywhere because there's a lot of things I just don't know. Or I could choose to trust somebody, and they might not be my end all be all, but they might teach me a few things. They might get me a few steps ahead in the process, and then I'll try again. And that was really truly when I had to sit in that space that I have learned over and over and over brings me to balance, right? We have to go to one far extreme and then another far extreme and then kind of find the middle ground. And for me, it was just knowing that being in this culture where a lot of people are not trusting doctors as much and medicine as much, but there's also a lot of corruption and a lot of things that don't work, you know, are being misused on the natural holistic wellness side. There's always going to be people stuck in their ways. There's always going to be people only specializing in a niche and something that they were taught. It's always going to be that way. And I know that for me too, in my journey previous to the metal and the implants, I was like I wanted the newest tool, the newest light laser, the newest this and the newest whatever, and just desperate for the next thing that was going to fix me. But let me tell you, as an emotional coach, as long as we're stressing to find the next fix and stressing to get the right tool and stressing, that's a cortisol spike in our body. So even if that tool is going to help us and be supportive, that cortisol spike in our body is not. It's detrimental. It tells our body we're not safe. And that new diet, that new food plan, that new tool probably won't settle in as well for our whole body healing if our cortisol is spiked. So what I want to really do is just encourage you to find the middle. Find the place where you don't have to be right anymore. You don't have to think that that next thing is going to be your cure-all, because guess what? No one thing is going to be our cure-all. It doesn't work like that. We're not even meant to have one thing be our cure-all, right? We would just worship it. So I really do want to encourage you to just step into this place of curiosity with me. Even if you don't totally like me or don't totally like my story, I just want you to be curious. I want you to just be willing to not have to be right. Because for me, when I let go of having to be right, and saying, wow, I'm open to this, or, maybe this is what's going on. In fact, I won't even tell you that I had breast implant illness to this day. I don't know that for sure. I do know that I had a lot of metal in my body. I do know that the breast implants were not supportive for my body and could have been adding to the problem. I do know now that I have chosen to trust who I believe are the right people and chosen to move forward with beautiful tests that are really in depth, that there's a mold thing going on in my body. And I believe it's been going on since we moved into the house, and that maybe it was my root cause the whole time, but I don't anymore have the need to say that was the problem, or breast implants were the problem, or metal in my mouth was the problem. I'm really okay to say maybe they were the problem, but for sure, none of them were really totally and completely supportive to my ultimate whole body health. So I feel like I've been really stuck in a lot of places lately, especially with this health thing. But the good news is, as long as there was somebody who knew things that I didn't, had tools to offer that I had never used before, and there was things that I'd never tried, there was still hope. And I'm really okay with moving forward, trying some new things, seeing how I feel, and then going from there. And I can tell you that I'm already feeling, much more hopeful that whatever the root is will be taken care of. And I already feel some shift, not necessarily in my overall energy, but what has changed for me is that I'm not sick anymore. I was getting sick if I worked out, even if it was just a minimal little workout. And I was also getting sick if any stress came into my life. And so I was spending about 2 or 3 weeks out of every month sick for the last year. And we have a complete halt to that. For that, I have to thank Michelle Scarlett, who I mentioned, and Lisa Sipkar, both beautiful women who work with women very differently and very thoroughly. Is that a word? And you'll see them here when my internet's working. So thank you for sitting here with me through this. Please, I love connecting. I love answering questions. Please reach out to me. Please ask me questions. Please let me know areas of your life where you feel stuck. Please let me know if there's anything you want me to cover here. Most importantly, visit me on Instagram, because that's where I spend most of my time. Please reach out to me however you would like to. And if you would like to join one of my tapping groups, I have one on Wednesday mornings, 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And our fingers are very crossed that we can move a new morning group onto schedule in the next year. And I have an evening group that is likely to start up. We'll meet every other week. And I for sure am having my intro to tapping courses that are about 3 weeks each. And that's going to be about every 3 or 4 months indefinitely. So be sure to pop into one of those, get to know me, get to know this tool. It is so powerful and so profound. And it's like I said before, this podcast is not a tapping podcast, but because tapping is so good at neutralizing our anxiety and our nervous system, it's going to undergird and support every single effort that you're putting in for yourself, every single effort that you're putting in for your family, it is going to be one tool that I can guarantee you is going to be a beautiful blanket or a beautiful, powerful support to any of the efforts you're already making because of the unique way that it works with your nervous system and your subconscious, and really truly helping you step into some of that clarity and some of that peace that you want, that's hard to grab, but you certainly deserve. So please stay here and join me in 1 week while I interview one of I call him my little guy. He's really not that little anymore. One of my clients who has been with me for a while, and we just want to share with you what it looks like to work together and how this tool can help both physically and emotionally when you believe in it and believe in yourself. Thank you so much.